Welcome to our ABC network. To begin our story, an event happens in cell A where the neurotransmitters travel through the synapse between cell A and cell B. One of four things can be the outcome of this. One, the molecules can float away into the interstitial fluid. Two, the molecules can go back up into the presynaptic membrane known as reuptake. Three, the molecules can metabolize through enzymatic degradation. Or four, the molecules can bind to the binding site located within the iotropic receptors of cell B's dendrites. Once binded to the receptors, the neurotransmitter molecules causes the pore down the middle to open, allowing sodium to go through the pore through two forces known as osmosis and electrostatic pressure. So after the molecules bind in the ions and travel into the cell, the ions concentration shows on the oscilloscope. It starts at the resting membrane potential, which is F, where it's just a straight line at negative 70, I'm sorry. And then once there's a little positive charge that goes into the cell, it is EPSP, which is also excitatory postsynaptic potential. So this is resting membrane potential, and this is EPSP.
First, we have the location of receptors that cause the threshold of excitation, and it is located in the axon hillock, which collects a summation of all the small electrical potentials, which cause the opening of voltage-gated channels, which is located right here, where the no neuron transmitter is involved, which these green dots are the neurotransmitter molecules. And once the negative 65 millivolt threshold is reached, then that's the initiation of the action potential. Next, we have the action potential, which is generated from rest because of summation from EPSP. It is reaching the threshold of excitation. A massive depolarization happens when sodium enters and reaches positive 55 from negative 65. At that point, sodium is at equilibrium, but the potassium gates are now open, and potassium is positive once it enters the cell. The positive charges repel each other, and that causes hyperpolarization. So this is where the action potential goes up, and then it comes down. This is the location of the threshold of excitation. This is where the summation takes place, and this is where RPM is located. Then here we have a massive increase in depolarization caused by sodium entering the cell, and then that's called hyperpolarization, which is caused by the potassium leaving the cell, and the sodium-potassium pumps bring the cells back to rest. This is where it comes back to rest. This is where the Na cells enter, and this is where K plus leaves, and this is the action potential.
So this is parts 5 and 6 of the Neurons Story. So to get to negative 65 MV or rest, you need a temporal spatial summation charge that continues throughout the phases. So to get here, you need that charge that will continue all the way through. This thick black line going through the middle is the resting. So when it's here, it's resting. Anytime you see it touch here, it's resting. So at A is at RMP, or resting membrane material is at A. Then it goes up to ESP, and the potassium is higher inside, and sodium and chloride are working together outside, at rest though. From there it goes to C, which is the highest point depolarization, and it's also the threshold of excitation. So once you get here, it goes up for depolarization. And that's when sodium is entering the cell. So sodium is coming in, and it's the movement of sodium. So it's coming in, and it's the highest point because this is depolarization, so it's going up. Then it gets to E, which is equilibrium, which is plus 55 MV. And sodium comes, again, it's coming inside, and potassium now is going to go out through hyperpolarization. So now that K plus, which is potassium, is coming out, this is the lowest point of depolarization due to the fact that everything is leaving now. So because of movement of the ion, because sodium is leaving and potassium is coming in, at the lowest point, potassium wants equilibrium, which is negative 75 MV. Now, when you come down, you're still going through hyperpolarization until potassium gets equilibrium, and then it goes back up to H, where everything is at rest. So it starts at rest, it goes through the phase, it goes through an up, it comes through a down, then it goes back to rest to give itself equilibrium again. This is parts 5 and 6.
This represents the action potential when the sodium gates open and close and the potassium gates open and close. Next, this is the process of action potential moving from nodes of Ranvier, and it's called saltatory conduction, which is when the action potential travels down the axon shaft. K plus leaves the cell. It's called hyperpolarization, and this is what it represents right here from the action potential. And then over here we have time 1 has action potential at the axon hillock, and all 3 nodes are at rest, including the terminal buttons. At time 2, the axon hillock has returned to rest, but the action potential has moved to node 1. At time 3, which would be located right here, the action potential will be now at node 2. Last, when the action potential reaches the terminal button, it interacts with calcium in a way that vessels bind to the presynaptic membrane. They go through excitosis. The molecules of neurotransmitters are spilled out into the synapses between cell B and cell C.